Like the time Mom went to the institute because she was breaking down. Like the car we had that wouldn't start. We had to walk to get around. And that same year on Christmas Eve, Dad went to the store. We checked his room. His things were gone. We didn't see him no more. There's a good chance you've heard this before. It's the bridge from Little Things, that track that really started it all for Good Charlotte. But this isn't some imagined scenario, a cute little vignette from a creative mind. It's real life. This is what Joel and Benji Madden experienced growing up. In this video, we're going to be looking at how this troubled start shaped Good Charlotte, not just on that first single, but right across their career. There's nothing cryptic about those lyrics from Little Things. That's how it was for the twin brothers from Waldorf, Maryland. They did grow up with a father who struggled with alcohol and with responsibility, until he left the family, that's right, on Christmas Eve. And they were raised by their mother, who struggled with her own mental health issues, as well as the autoimmune condition, lupus. Listening to Good Charlotte, particularly those early records, is like pulling at a patchwork of honesty and trauma. The twins were outcasts in high school, and you better believe they were the guys who were picked last in gym class. Music became an outlet, a creative escape. But not just a creative escape. It had the potential to be a total escape from all the hardships they'd endured, breaking the cycle of poverty and struggle for good. It was a Beastie Boys show in 1996 that kick-started the Madden's musical journey. Even though we never played an instrument before, we knew that we had to start making music after seeing the Beastie Boys. Joel would later say, "We couldn't believe people could do what they did on stage. It was so powerful, we had to form a band." The Madden brothers were dead set on getting their band signed and off the ground from the very beginning. They poured their heart and soul into the project, researching ways to catch the eye of labels, sending out promotional packages in the hope of landing a deal, and playing a ton of shows around DC and Maryland. Slowly, the band started to come together. Paul Thomas, the brother of Joel Madden's homecoming date, joined on bass, while Aaron Escalipo took up drum duties. By 1998, 4 had become 5 as Billy Martin joined, now performing under the name Good Charlotte after the children's book by Carol Beach York. The group continued playing any venue or festival who would have them, across DC, Annapolis, and Baltimore. Thanks to their solid work effort and dogged determination, the guys found themselves supporting the great and the good of the late 90s punk rock scene. Lit, Blink-182, and Bad Religion, to name just 3. They also landed a slot on the locals only stage at HF Festival, held at DC's RFK Kennedy Memorial Stadium in fall of 1999. After a demo of Little Things found airplay on local radio in Philadelphia, Good Charlotte attracted the attention of Sony Music. Things were about to blow up in a big way. Madden brothers had set out with an objective in mind, and they'd smashed it. In May of 2000, Sony subsidiary Epic Records signed the band, and that summer they got to work on their debut album. Kicking off with Little Things, that self-titled record was a document of where Good Charlotte were at and how far they'd come. The lead track is a trademark slice of nu metal riffage and hip-hop inspired hooks. But there's a real darkness to the lyrics. Benji and Joel Madden were not shy about their background. They weren't afraid to let everyone know just how hard those early years had been, and so their tales of growing up with an absent father and a mother struggling to hold everything together were laid bare. But Sony were not so impressed. Album sales were weak, and the group risked being dropped. The dream had only just begun, and it was at risk of being snuffed out. Some bands would have just given up, said, "We tried, it didn't work out." Good Charlotte were different. If the record wasn't getting enough exposure, then they'd get out there and spread the word. Tours with Phoenix TX and MXPX did the job. While the band was on the road, album sales went through the roof. Meanwhile, videos, Little Things, Motivation Proclamation, and Festival Song showed the world what these guys were all about. The label was won over. The band had proved they were megastars in the making. Not only did Sony decide to not drop them, they got the guys back in the studio for another round. After a shaky start, the first Good Charlotte record had turned the quintet into low-level celebrities. The Madden brothers in particular had real star potential. The look, the swagger, and the songwriting ability. Drummer Aaron Escalopio had left after the first album was released, and so the Vandals' Josh Freese took over for the recording of the second. The band were ready to make a big impression on the mainstream charts. The Young and the Hopeless, released in October 2002, did exactly that. It sent Good Charlotte stratospheric. The guys were clear from the outset that they didn't just want to remake their first record, and so the scratchy nu metal intro was replaced by epic strings and creepy gothic melodies. The intro track was named A New Beginning. They weren't joking. While the label didn't mind the boys flexing their creative muscles and doing their own thing, they still wanted a bit of that magic that made the first record such a hit. Can you make another loser anthem like Little Things? Benji Madden remembered being asked. So they wrote the anthem, kind of as a joke. Another loser anthem, whoa whoa. Joke or not, the tune resonated with listeners around the world. Girls and Boys was another track with the irresistible hook, summery major chords, and smart lyrics that would become part of Good Charlotte's signature sound. But if The Young and the Hopeless was a record of a band evolving, the themes that had made fans fall in love with the group in the first place were all present and correct. Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous has become one of the seminal Good Charlotte tracks, and one of their biggest hits. Plenty of people have pointed out the irony of Joel Madden singing about the super rich and then marrying Nicole Richie a few years later. But this is kind of missing the point. The song is about the ignorance of the rich and famous to the plight of normal Americans, and of normal people all over the world, a plight that would have been very real to the Madden brothers growing up. Sure, the lyrics are sassy and satirical, but they are coming from a position of genuine, lived experience. The brothers hadn't forgotten where they came from, despite releasing an album that sold 4 million copies. Following that second album, Good Charlotte had gone from being pop-punk famous to mainstream famous. With new drummer Chris Wilson, the group were playing to massive audiences right across the globe, including a tour of Japan in 2004. But musically, Good Charlotte stuck out like a sore thumb. There had always been more about their sound than the straight-up pop-punk of some of their peers, and they never quite slotted into that scene. But they weren't Usher or Eminem either, so where were they supposed to fit? It turned out the guys had a bunch of different ideas and influences swirling around in their heads, so they threw it all at the pot for their third album, The Chronicles of Life and Death. Global hit single I Just Wanna Live turned out to be the poppiest thing the group had written, while Ghost of You touched on latter-day AFI territory, mixed in with plenty of soaring soft rock elements. Gothic flavors collide with pop and hip-hop all over the record, with just enough rock-out guitars to keep the punk crowd happy. The critics weren't quite so taken with the album. Reviews for the record weren't great, and some fans felt a little alienated by the whirlwind of new directions. The fact that I Just Wanna Live got caught up in the Sony payola scandal when the label paid for radio stations to play certain singles, unbeknownst to Good Charlotte, didn't help. But Joel Madden stands by the record. "We're the band who will always go left when you want us to go right," he later said. "Don't go putting a label on Good Charlotte. They'll surprise you every time." Almost immediately after The Chronicles of Life and Death, the guys began work on their fourth album. But they were dealt a blow when drummer Chris Wilson left. Deciding to take a short hiatus and spend time with their families, the band got back together at the beginning of 2006, adding Dean Butterworth to the lineup and getting back into the studio that summer. The resulting record, Good Morning Revival, released in March of 2007, features more synth and more pop elements than anything the guys had done up to now. Most of those who wanted another loser anthem to stage dive and slam dance to were disappointed, but that didn't matter to the guys in the band. From the start, the Maddens and their bandmates had been unapologetic about what they were doing. If they wanted to listen to the Police and Oasis rather than Propagandhi and Operation Ivy while they made a record, then that's what they do. And if fans wished it was the other way around, well, tough. Maybe this is a bit harsh. I don't think the guys were looking to deliver a middle finger to their fanbase. More of a thank you to those who had stuck by them through it all. For the Maddens, the journey had started out impossible. It had gotten easier, but they'd still succeeded against all the odds. If they wanted to record an electro-disco track and use a bit of auto-tune, then who was going to stand in their way? The thing is, for all their successes and for all the hit records, Good Charlotte were still the outsiders, still reflecting on those early years and everything they'd achieved as self-made dudes. The band's biggest fans got this. They understood. For their next record, Good Charlotte decided to roll back the clock. Cardiology, named for the study in science of the heart, recalls some of the pop-punk of their earlier releases. But the idea was not just to please the fans of those early records. Good Charlotte were never going to do something like that. Instead, the band decided this rockier sound was the best way to convey the rawer emotion of the material they were working on. With Cardiology released, Good Charlotte decided to take another step back. Relentless touring and recording was a struggle, and the guys were all getting older. They had families and kids, and after the rough times of their own upbringing, the Madden twins wanted to make sure their own families had a better experience than they'd had. But that didn't mean turning their backs on music. This was a lifelong commitment for Benji and Joel. Writing and playing music as the Madden brothers, the pair were able to channel their creative ideas into something a little more stripped down and intimate. Fans of Good Charlotte loved the Madden brothers' material, but this wasn't going to sate their hunger for long. They wanted a new GC record, and so did the band themselves. After a hiatus of almost 5 years, the guys decided it was time to get the band back together. Youth Authority picked up where Cardiology left off, It was rockier and spikier than some of that middle period pop, but it was lush too. Good Charlotte always hated being confined by those 5 dudes with guitars limitations, and so they created a rich set of musical textures for their fans to enjoy. Produced by Goldfinger's John Feldman, and with appearances from Simon Neil of Scottish alt-rockers Biffy Clyro, there was a hefty dose of punk and hardcore in the mix too. The Maddens would later say that Youth Authority was an intermediary record, a rangefinder to get them back into the swing of recording as a band. Follow-up, Generation RX, found them in a more reflective mood, following the death of rapper and friend Lil Peep. Tracks like Prayers served as critiques of the tendency to offer thoughts and prayers in the wake of a crisis, rather than do anything useful or meaningful about it. While the album title referred to the opioid epidemic that had claimed Lil Peep's life, the band were well and truly back, and unwilling to compromise on the themes close to their hearts. To say the Maddens had been on a journey is an understatement. The brothers essentially came from nothing, with a father who walked out on them and with a mother who sacrificed everything to try to give her sons a chance in life. To come from that, and to become one of the biggest bands on the planet, real gold-plated music industry megastars, that's something truly incredible. And the thing is, they never sold out. They never sold out because they never sold in the first place. From the opening bars of The Little Things to the soaring chorus of Actual Pain, Good Charlotte have never conformed to expectations. They do what they want to do, the way they want to do it. And they never lost sight of their roots. The trauma of those early years became creative fuel, keeping the flame of innovation and invention burning. It doesn't get much more punk than that. You've just witnessed the Madden twins rise from small-town dreams to pop-punk icons. But that's just the beginning. Subscribe now and dive into the next untold stories from the scene's biggest bands, where every journey is as wild as the last. Let me know what you think in the comments, and give me some hints on who I should cover next. Until next time,